My name is David Murphy. I am the Marketing Programs Manager with BayWa RE. Today, excited to be talking with Unirac and their railless mounting best practices. We'll define the concept differences between a railless system and one using rails, specifically its impact across the business. We're going to talk about the benefits, but also the limitations. And lastly, things like waste, speed, aesthetics. Quite a bit to cover in 60 minutes. Also excited about this material because it's the first time it's given. Literally was just approved by NABCEP, and to clarify, you must be in attendance for this original webinar to receive the CE credit. It qualifies for 1 CE credit. Unfortunately, we aren't able to give the CE credits for watching the recording. Presenting for us today, we have 2 folks from Unirac. Josh Brown is the Strategic Account Manager for the Midwest region. A little bit about Josh. He obtained his associate's degree in business administration. He's worked in finance, marketing, sales. He owned a roofing company and worked in the roofing industry before making the jump to solar. Josh recently earned his NABCEP PV Associate certification. And also we have Rich Crockett, Installer Training Specialist for Unirac. Rich provides product training and technical support to installers, and previously he worked in Colorado since 2012. Rich has installed grid-tied solar on projects that range from small single-family homes to large 900-plus home contracts. Before getting into solar, Rich worked in IT, finishing his AAS in network administration in 2011. Before we dive in, a couple quick housekeeping items. As I mentioned, we scheduled 60 minutes for this webinar. That does include Q&A. If you've joined any of our other webinars, we absolutely encourage questions. We want to make this as interactive and as valuable to you as possible. Please enter your questions as you have them in the questions window. You can also use the chat, but the questions window, we're going to save those for the end of the material and go through all the questions at once. The webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to the recording once we've wrapped up, as well as, again, if you've attended this live recording, your NABCEP CE credit. But as always, the really valuable content comes at the end with the questions, your questions, so stick around for that. Okay, with that, Josh, I'll turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I hope everybody can hear me. Dave, can you hear me? Thumbs up. Rich?
Loud and clear. Yep.
Awesome. Dave was pretty thorough about what we're going to cover today, but my goal is to hopefully have everybody understand the rail system is fairly new compared to the rail system, and really consider it as an alternative to rail when the application fits. So like Dave said, please enter your questions as we go so nobody forgets those, and then we will, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about this, so we will address those at the end of the presentation. Again, Dave went through these pretty quickly, so this is our agenda. Railless is awesome, but there are some limitations on when it works, the optimal arrays where it works on, and roofs. So we'll go over those as well, and we'll show you. I have actual live parts. I don't know how well it's gonna show up on my screen, but we'll go over those and kind of how they're implemented in the total system. A little bit about Unirac. We are one of the most seasoned racking company there is in the United States. We've been around for over 20 years. One of the few racking companies that outlived their first warranty. Done a lot of racking over those 20 years. And we're very innovative as far as our product offerings, and we do offer all 3 of our applications through distribution, so pitch roof, flat roof, and ground mount applications. And we do pride ourselves with having the best customer support. Our responsiveness is very fast. and all of our services are second to none in the industry. I guess the best way to show the differences between rail and railless, the features and the benefits, is I guess kind of review the railed system, which I'm assuming most of you are familiar with. Basically, a railed system is you have your attachments to the roof. You attach your rail to those attachments, and then you attach the modules to those rails using mid clamps and end clamps. And I want to say, Rich, my partner, Rich, if I miss anything or you want to emphasize anything as we're going, just tell me to stop.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I did forget. And then once the modules are attached, usually you cut the rail. You have to lift the modules to cut the rail, or you can flush cut it with the bandsaw. Onto the railless. I like to say it's the same but different as rail. You still lay out your attachments, you stagger your attachments just like you would rail. But instead of attaching the modules to rail, you're actually attaching those modules to the attachments that you're placing on the roof. So this is it. You install your roof attachments and you install your panels. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a little more than a two-step process, but overall, that's it. So let's get into a little more in depth about how the attachments attach, how they work, and how the modules are attached to those attachments. On a rail, you have your flashing. You have a lag if you're rafter mounting the L-foot to the roof, and then your rail's attached to the L-foot with the T-bolt, and then again you're attaching your modules to that rail with the mid clamp and end clamp. General spans, depending on where you guys are located, 4 to 6 foot spans. As you get north, a little more north in the Midwest, where Rich and I are, those snow loads require you to use a 4 foot span. But generally down as you get south or west, 6 foot spans are an option with the rail. So this is how a rail, how a railless modules are attached to a railless attachment. You still have a leg if you're rafter mounting. You have your flashing, just as you did with the rail product. But instead of an L-foot, what you're attaching to the roof here is either the attachment itself, or in our instance, it's a slider. We call it a micro slider, which we'll go into after when we get into our SFM system. But most railless systems are basically we call it a shared rail system. Most are like this, which helps reduce penetrations into the roof and speeds up the installation time. And what a lot of installers, when Rich and I are talking to them, they're concerned with snow loads, wind ratings, and spans of a railless system. But in most instances, a railless system will have the same wind rating and snow loads as a standard rail system. Rich, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to note, if you look at how the module sits on the attachment, the difference between the rail and the railless actually has a little bit more of a footprint on the module. If you want to go back one slide to the rail, you see that there's a very small amount of structure that the module is actually sitting on. Everything in between those points isn't really being used. So that's kind of the advantage of railless, is that we're going to get a little bit more of a footprint for our attachment on our modules, and we're not wasting material in between those attachments.
Excellent. Not all railless systems are equal. I guess the differences in railless systems that are out on the market now differentiate a lot more than the rail products. There are features and benefits of some rail products that are better than the next, but in pretty much in all circumstances, a rail system is a rail system. You need your attachment, you need your rail, and you put your modules on the rail. Railless systems out there, there's a lot of deviation between one racking to the other. So with that said, some of the benefits or features of a railless system is you don't have to lug 168-inch or 246-inch rail around. The longest part of a railless system, well, our railless system is our trim rail, which is the length of a module. So what this does, the benefit of that is you can load more jobs on a truck in the morning, a lot less space in your warehouse if you're warehousing the racking, and it's just a lot easier to use.
Yeah, we stuffed a pin case system in the back of a Tesla. So logistically,
yeah.
You can pack quite a bit of this racking in a small space.
Having installed a lot of these systems, Rich and I have, we found one of the main benefits of a rail system is the flexibility on the roof. As most of you have encountered, with your layout and your plans in your hand and you get on the roof, a lot of times there has to be adjustments made. There's vents in the roof that weren't indicated on the layout, or the modules just won't fit how you had it on your layout. A railless system gives you a lot of flexibility on the fly when you're on the roof, as far as changing a whole array from landscape to portrait, or changing a portion of the array from landscape to portrait. It's very, very easy. And designing your array, you can do mixed orientations very, very easily with rail system, which would maximize your the amount of modules you can get on a roof. As I said, fewer penetrations because it is a shared rail system. There's no cutting rail, a lot less waste, faster installs, just because there are a lot less attachments. I mean, that's one of the main factors of speeding up an install. And the looks of it is amazing, in my opinion. What a railless system does is it makes, especially black on black modules, it makes the array look like it's floating on that roof. It looks very, very good. In some jurisdictions, require you to have a rough-in inspection once you have the rail installed. You need to wait to have an inspector come out and do a rough-in inspection before you can even start putting modules on. In most jurisdictions, we found that this eliminates that rough-in inspection. Rich, is there anything you want to add or emphasize?
Yes, especially with electrical rough-ins. When doing a rail system, you typically have to mount your structure and have everything bonded in order for the inspector to come out and inspect it so you can finish your job. With the railless system, the bonding actually doesn't happen until you start placing those modules. So you don't need to have, in most areas, you won't have to have a rough electrical inspection, because the bonding, there's nothing really to be inspected until the actual system is completed, because that's when the bonding is happening.
Okay. Applications now, primary applications is for the railless system is power rough applications and rough applications. So this is kind of where you get into the nuts and bolts and the big differences from start to finish when you're planning to install your railless system. We have, it is very different as far as the crews out there installing this. It's, for a lot of the crews, it's going to be like a foreign language for the most part. And it's going to take a couple installs for them to get used to. So training, I advise all of you with any railless system, reach out to the racking company and have them send people out, experts like Rich, or I mean, I'm an expert, but kind of not really. But people like us, Rich and I, will come out on the roof with your crews, show them tips and tricks, best practices on how to install any of our products, not just railless. But Rich and I have found that that's key to get comfortable with installing a railless system, because once you have it down, it is going to be a lot faster. And we went over the features and benefits of it before. It's going to be a lot faster. You can do more projects at once with the railless system. So I highly recommend that you get that training for your crews. Design tools, utilize the racking company's online design tools. I mean, it's obviously it's going to help you out, especially determining span charts and things like that. With railless, the most optimal layout on railless is landscape, which is going to be a lot different than the rail system, which you have to do in portrait. So keep that in mind to optimize parts and install time. Landscape is the preferable orientation for the railless. And like I said before, you can mix orientations very, very easily with that landscape to portrait and we mentioned the inspection switchover plan. We touched on that as well. Rich?
Yeah, so I'd just like to add, the training is definitely a useful tool when adopting from rail to railless. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve. If you give us a call, we can come out. We'll either come out on site or do some warehouse training with your crew. And we can really accelerate that learning curve and help the guys get right up to speed. And then also to add with the landscape design, the idea behind that is that we can use less attachments if we can take advantage of the 6-foot spans. So when you are designing with railless landscape, you can actually achieve those 6-foot spans as long as they're acceptable in your jurisdiction.
We already touched on this. Training is key with the crews. We have SAMs all over the country. We have ISSs, installer sales specialists, or technical sales specialists, I'd like to call Rich, all over the country. When you guys are installing your, I'm going to emphasize this, because when you're scheduling or planning on using or doing your installs with the get people out there to train the crews on the roof, help install it. It's going to go a long ways to adapting railless into your. And there's my dog. Sorry if you can hear her.
Hey, Josh, if I can interject just for a second. I'm getting a little lag. Maybe it's the video portion. Do you want to try and stop showing video on your end and see if that helps the audio come through any clearer?
Sure. Sure. Okay, is that any clearer?
So far, yeah. And again, sorry to interject. Okay. Yeah, if you want to continue with that.
Well, let me know, and I can try and dial in on my phone as much as I can. So if I start lagging, let me know. Okay. Again, optimizing operations. Um, sorry, it's my puppy is not happy. With the railless system, it's built from the south edge of the array up. So what you do is you align your first row, as you can see in this picture. And once that's aligned and square, everything is square building up to the north end. So you don't have to worry about aligning your modules on a railed system. And with our system, you can level it as you go. So let me show you. Oh, you can't see my video. So a big advantage of our railless system is you can adjust. There's post installation height adjustment. So if you have somebody on the ground and very few roofs are level, if you have somebody on the ground and say, yeah, well, your array is dipping in the middle. One tool. This is a one tool installation. You can use this one tool to adjust each of our micro rails up or down after installation, which is huge for a lot of installers. Rich, is there something you want to add to this?
So a little bit, your layout process is going to be basically the same as doing a rail system. Where you chalk your lines is going to be a little bit different. Where your attachments go are now going to be on the perimeter of the module instead of inside the module. And then you're going to start with your trim skirt because that's what the entire system is going to basically be based off of. So the trim skirt is going to be on the all south edge of your array. You're going to mount the attachments to the roof, get them in line using a string line like shown in the picture below. You'll mount your trim skirt, make sure it is square, and then once that is square, you know that your system will go up straight and square. So everything is based off of that bottom edge, and it also makes setting the system a lot easier than starting on rail, where you don't have basically a toe board or a catch to hold those modules in place. So you're kind of really playing around with the modules, trying to get them straight. It's a lot easier on the railless system because you have that trim skirt that captures that bottom row of modules, and it makes it super easy.
The biggest question that we have on railless system is wire management. Because there's no rail to mount your optimizers or to zip tie wires to. So most of the wire management on a railless system is done on the ground, and the optimizers are attached to the modules with MLPE clamps, and you use wire clips, modular wire clips, to manage your wire inside the frame of the module. And that's one of the biggest differences between rail systems is most of the wire management is done on the ground before the module is placed on the roof.
Yep, and then I'd like to add, you can modify the labor on the railless system a lot easier than you can with the rail system. So with the rail system, you kind of have a set process where you have to get the rails up, level, and bonded before you can get the modules installed. With the railless system, you have a lot more flexibility in how you approach the system and kind of your workflow process. So you can have a guy go up on the roof and do the layout and start on the attachments. You can have a guy on the ground starting managing mods. And then you can have a guy also on the roof just setting the trim skirt. Once that trim skirt is set, you can start setting modules. You don't have to wait for all the attachments to be placed. You don't have to wait for all your jumpers to be set. You can really start setting modules pretty much within the first hour. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat on a railless system as opposed to a railed system. That's what I like about it.
Again, this slide just goes back to the quickness, the time savings of installing a railless system. Rich just mentioned, smaller crews. Ideally, you'd want a 3 to 4 man crew on a railless system, installing it on the roof. And that will allow you, and you can get more jobs on a truck or a van. You could have two, depending on how many crews you have, 2 or 3 jobs going on at the same time.
I just wanted to address a quick question on the grounding. So the grounding is integrated into the attachments. So when you're placing your modules, that's what's going to complete the ground on your array. As for taking the ground down to the equipment, you would essentially just attach a lug, a grounding lug somewhere on one of the modules inside the array, and that would create your bond.
Again, basically you can expand your business with your current crews and current workspace just by switching to railless. And we touched on those features and benefits before and how that is obtained. All right, selecting the railless system. These are some things to keep in mind when you're deciding whose railless system you're going to use. Single tool install. With our SFM railless, our whole system can be installed with a hex tool. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah. Okay. And as I mentioned, post install leveling. With the hex tool, you can go and adjust at each attachment point. After install, you don't have to remove modules, adjust rail on T-bolts. It's very, very easy. This is big too, is module thickness universal. So especially last year, people were having difficulties getting modules. So a lot of times you guys would just take any module that was available at the time, which, the dimensions of those modules could change from what you originally had in your plan set. Our railless system, it's modular agnostic from 32 millimeters up to 40 millimeters. So, and that's about 96% of the modules out there. So it doesn't matter the thickness of your module with our system. It will fit pretty much every module that's out there on the market. Rich mentioned the structural trim. Our trim rail is structural. And once you get that trim rail set square, you're off to the races. You're setting modules because that trim rail is basically supporting the majority of the weight of that array. So once you get that square and your wire management done on the ground, you're setting modules right away. Rich, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. So yeah, the trim rail is structural. You can put this system on basically a 12-12 pitch if you really wanted to, and it's not going to go anywhere.
All right, let's get into SFM. This is our railless product. There are videos on here, but I'm not going to play them because I don't want to affect the presentation itself. And I had actual parts to show you guys, but my video is off. But as we mentioned before, if you look over to the right, that's the flashing and the micro slider for our SFM. So very similar to regular flash kit or our regular flash kit. You have a structural screw, goes down, it attaches the structural, micro slider in place and the flashing. And then we do have a separate flashing for our trim rail, but basically works in the same way as an old Alpha with the flashing.
And these structural screws
Can you
are
see
really
the videos?
nice. Yeah.
Okay. What's nice about our rail system as well is it's very flexible. If you're not, if you lay your row of flashing down and you find that you're, maybe an inch or two off of where you need to be, this micro slider can turn 180 degrees upslope. So you have about 6 inches of play with our SFM system when it comes to attaching your micro rail and your sliders. You can take this slide away, Rich.
Yep, so this is what we're talking about with the structural trim. So this is where you want to start on your system after your layout and your chalk lines are complete. You will install the trim attachments into the rafters all along the same row. You will pull a string like you see in the picture. So what I typically do is I'll set the first and last foot in that row, and then I'll leave all the ones in the middle loose. I will pull a string from the first and last and pull all those attachments to the string to know that they are in a straight line. Once that's all set, I will attach my trim skirt and I can start setting my mods after that. It creates a nice square base to work off of.
It does, and as you can see, the picture of our trim rail is very aesthetically pleasing. And we do have caps that go on each end of our trim rail. It helps aesthetically and to keep, oh, look at, Rich has a real live one. It helps keep bees and wasps out of there from making nests as well. So Rich is showing you the actual trim rail and kind of mini modules set against that. We can, if you guys want to see this tabletop of our SFM, we can show it to you at the end. So with our trim rail, we have these module clips. Again, like I said, these module clips allow us to have this system modular agnostic, like I said. So depending on the orientation of that clip, which end is facing up and which groove you have into the trim rail, it corresponds with the thickness of your module. So like I said, any module 32 to 40 millimeter is going to fit on this one system. So I'm gonna try and get my Dave. I'm gonna try and get my video back on because I want to show everybody this. So flashing, the micro rail goes in the flashing like this, just like we saw in previous slides, and then, or this is a micro rail, and then this is a slider. So this is basically your shared rail here. And what this does is you just come along, and hard to do, clamp it on the micro rail. It's dimpled at the end so it doesn't fall off the roof while you're on there. I get this backwards. So you would set all these with your flashing, go and clip these in. As you can see on the slide itself, these come preset to 40 millimeter. So what you do is you lift your module up, you stick it in the south facing end of this micro rail, clamp it down, and then tighten it down with your hex tool, which I do have, with your hex tool. And that's it. So you tighten here, and then you tighten it here on the micro rail or the slider.
And then
I hope you guys can see that. And then your next module will come in and rock into place here, and then the south edge of that module is in place. There's nothing you have to do after that. And this is self-bonding. It has, I don't know if you can see the bonding pin right there. So all of this system is self-bonding east and west. Rich, did you want to add something to that?
Just the bonding part. You got it.
Yep. Okay.
Yep, so they just rock
Oops.
onto the sliders. You'll kind of hold the module in place, slide that micro rail down, clamp it down, and then you tighten it in. Pretty simple little process. The setting the modules is super duper easy when it comes to railless.
Okay, on the north side of the modules, anywhere two modules meet, we have splices. So they act in the exact same way as those micro rails do. They come preset at the 40 millimeter. You clamp down on the modules and you tighten these with the same hex tool. There are going to be times where these splices will meet up with one of your attachments. So we have attached splices that have feet on the end of these that will attach to the micro rail. It's just going to increase the structurability of your array. These are pretty self-explanatory. Rich, does you want to add anything to that?
Yep, so the attached splices help reduce use of parts. So instead of using a foot and a splice where I can just use the hybrid splice. So I can pay for just one part instead of two. And then those splices also, they help create a nice structure across the mods going east and west where the mods meet at the corners. So this will prevent any dipping from the corners of the mods and create a nice flat structure. And it carries that bond east and west between the modules through those bonding pins on the bottom. And like Josh mentioned, it installs just like the rest of the micro rails.
Okay, this is a big feature of the system, so I want to be able to show you guys this. Hopefully it conveys through my webcam here. So once the whole system is installed, you can go back and adjust the height on this without taking off modules and adjusting rail. And it's as simple as taking your tool, the one tool that you can install the whole system with. And this is going to be, I'm trying to get the right orientation. So there's a hole in the top of the micro rail here and kind of a set pin. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but I can do it with my hands. So you can adjust each of these attachments 1.5 inches up or down. I don't know if you guys can see it going up or down or not. You can do the same thing with our attached splices, which we just showed you. That's a huge benefit, time saver to our railless system is the post-installation height adjustment.
Yeah, as opposed to rail, where you have to have the rails leveled before you set your modules. With this system, you can set your modules and level the system afterwards, or you can level as you go. The great benefit of this is that you're not having to reach underneath the module, trying to reach an L foot so you can adjust a rail up or down roof. Like Josh mentioned, you just walk up, you stick your tool down the head of the attachment, and it'll drive the attachment up and down off of the roof, which will bring the modules up and down off the roof. Makes leveling super easy, and especially when you get on those roofs where they're not very flat and they're kind of wavy gravy across the roof. This makes it really easy to make that system look really flat. So it's a really nice feature.
I don't know, hopefully you can see that video, but it kind of shows you how far that can be adjusted. So as I mentioned, everything is self-bonding going east and west. North-south is not bonded, self-bonding, because we couldn't put bonding pins on the north side of our micro rail because it affects how that module will lock into here. So basically all you have to do is put a mid clamp in between each row. So you need one mid clamp. If you go to the widest part of the array or the longest part of the array and place one mid clamp in each row, that's going to bond your whole system going north-south.
Yep.
That's it. I wanted to have time. I think I did good. About 20 minutes for questions and answers. Dave, is there anything, any comments or questions that you may have to start off?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions that have already come in. And as a reminder, anything that wasn't covered during Josh or Rich's material, feel free to ask those here in either the Q&A window or the chat. And yes, looks like the first question, oh, Rich, I think you answered the question about grounding. What about grounding, and is that also done on the ground? But can you kind of state that once again, just to be clear?
Yeah, so as you saw in the micro rail attachment and the splices, those bonding pins are on the south end of the attachments, so that the bond is created by the attachment actually making contact with the module. It's going to break the anodization on the frame and create that bonding path. So the structure still bonds to the modules. However, it's in a little bit different of an action in that the bonding doesn't actually happen until the modules are set in place.
Okay. And just to make a note of that, I don't know if there's any installers on here in Minnesota. They just came out with new ICC codes at the end of March, requiring a master electrician to be on site as soon as your array can carry a current or needs to be bonded. The advantage to this system is there is no current, there is no bonding until you put that first module on the roof. So technically you could have 3 crews out there at once installing the racking system and not require a master on site until that first module is laid. Another big advantage to this system.
Were you going to tackle the follow-up question, Rich?
Yeah, I guess so. So the maximum clearance, you should be able to get about 4.5 inches at least, all the way maxed out between the roof and the bottom of the module. So if you're looking at tucking Solidex or combiner boxes under the modules, you shouldn't have issues doing that. However, if you have like a really tall combiner box, you'd want to make sure that it's not underneath the module frame if it's too tall. That way it doesn't cause any interference. The system can get pretty low to the roof as well.
Actually, let me go back to the question on grounding because a follow-up question came in for that. My ask would just be about conduit. Does the conduit stay the same?
Yeah, so if you're using like an EMT, IMC, rigid, flex, whatever you're already using is fine. If you're, depending on your local jurisdictions, some areas they want your conduit to be able to be bonded as well. So in that case, you would run like EMT from your inverter up to the roof and then basically terminate your wires into a combiner box. And you would bring your ground from the module into the combiner box to carry that ground down to the AC equipment.
Okay, chime in if that doesn't answer your question 100%, Jose. Next question, are there specific types of panels that work better with railless systems? And then he clarifies, in other words, are there any gotchas with specific types of panels?
The only gotcha would be on, I think we have the majority. I mean, obviously these module manufacturers keep coming out with new modules and new dimensions. So we try to stay on top of that as much as possible. The only gotcha, I know REC produces a 30 millimeter module, which won't work on this. And there is a I believe a 46 millimeter module out there, SunPower, which most of the installers can't get, or so those are the only gotchas. No, there's not a model that works better with the railless. As long as it's within the 32 millimeter width to 40 millimeter width, they'll all install the same.
Yeah, and then to add to the frameless module, that wouldn't be able to fall within that 32 to 40 millimeter range. So we don't have anything for railless with frameless modules.
Okay, earlier on, Josh, you talked about some of the logistical advantages, but can you just go over once again, just quickly highlight the advantage of a railless system?
Again, the advantages is it's a lot more portable. It's a lot more flexible. It's a lot quicker. Those are probably the three main advantages. Self-bonding. Those are probably the four main advantages of a railless system, which all those together improves time and improves money. Rich, did I miss any?
I'd say from an installer standpoint, now I don't have to have box trucks. You know, I can move more towards like a work van. So anything that can carry panels and not necessarily rails anymore will now be available for me to use. So instead of having to have, you know, a really long box truck in order to carry those long rails, we move to a more efficient vehicle, stack out the same amount of jobs on it, and save a little money that way as well.
And Rich and I are the big advantage. Have us come out.
That's number one.
Please have us come out, and we're going to get on the roof with your guys. We're going to take care of them, get their initial feedback and immediate feedback, and we'll have fun doing it.
Actually, that does bring up a question. Just a note that I took as you were talking. I know that Unirac has a lot of really good, well-done videos on YouTube, on your website, product information. But Josh, you're talking about training. Is there training videos along those lines, or is that all done in person?
We have a ton. We have worked very, very hard and made a huge initiative in the last few months to upgrade and add additional videos on our YouTube channel. All of our videos are on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search Unirac, or go to our website, hit click technical support. All of our documentation and videos can be found there too. But we have come up recently with some very good videos that you can watch. We kind of segment those to certain areas of each of our racking, so you don't have to sit and watch a 5-minute video to get your answer. So a lot of your questions can be answered on our website and our YouTube channel. But again, you're not going to get, without Rich and I out there with your crews, they're not going to feel comfortable with the system. So it's our goal to make them feel comfortable with our system as quickly as possible.
Nice.
Yeah, and then to add to that, we can always do video training as well. So if you're not particular on having people out at your job site, we could always do a live training with Josh and I going over the product with your crew. We can be installer specific with that. We've got a lot of options available to learn about our products and provide training. So just reach out to us. We'll work with you and make whatever work.
Good. New question came in. In areas of high wind loading where you may use a 3-rail system, how and where do you increase the attachments?
That's a good question. Depending on the amount of uplift, the system may or may not qualify. You would have to look at the engineering on it. However, most likely what would happen is that the amount of attachments on the roof increases. So instead of 6-foot spans, it goes to 4-foot spans, or from 4 to 2. So you would really just be increasing the number of attachments on the module instead of increasing the number of rails.
And the majority of the time with 4-foot spans, which is what the majority of our installers in the Midwest use, our wind rating and snow loads is the same as rail. It's 115 and 60 60-pound snow loads. So
Yeah.
if you
Anywhere
have to, if you go up from there, like Rich said, we probably have to add attachments. We may have to go to 2-foot 2-foot spans, or add periodic attachments on those rafters that are in between your spans.
Arthur, I hope that helps. Let us know if any follow-up questions to that. How about, talked a lot about the benefits of SFM Infinity, and Josh, I really liked what you were saying about the benefit to the homeowner. So my question is, can you go over that once again? And as the installer is having that sales conversation with the homeowner, should the homeowner care? What's it to them?
Well, I can give you an example of how the aesthetics of our SFM system has helped installer sales be successful. We had somebody an installer approach us in Kansas City. The HOA was, I wanted to say dead set against, but we're reluctant to approve solar on these homes. These were big homes, presidential shingles, beautiful homes next to a golf course. So the only racking system he got approved through the homeowners association was SFM because of the aesthetics of it. We actually sent out a survey, ambiguous, no racking names were on the pictures, and we sent out 100 of these to random homeowners just to pick which system you liked the best, which was more aesthetically appeasing to you. And 87% of that 100 people said our SFM system was the most aesthetic.
It's good. I like your comment earlier about how it just looks like it's floating.
It really does.
Yep.
It really, really does.
You get those black
And any
on black
installers out there, if you want pictures of actual arrays that Rich and I have put on, I mean, we've done with SFM. Rich has got a ton of pictures, so reach out to Rich and he'll get those pictures over to you.
Check me out on Instagram or reach out and I can share a folder with you.
Good. How about where would SFM not be a good option for an install?
Metal roof. Right now, we don't have metal roof attachments for our SFM system, so we don't have a metal roof version yet of our railless. Depending on the installer experience, higher pitched roofs. So a lot of installers prefer rail systems on 10, 12, 11, 12 pitch systems because they use the rails to kind of stand on as toe boards once they have them installed. Obviously, with the railless system, you don't really have that. The system can be installed on everything up to a 12-12 pitch, but it will depend on the installer comfort once you start to get to those extreme roof pitches.
Okay. And this question, see if I kind of paraphrase, but railless systems are certainly not brand new. And I've heard installers say that they've tried it in the past and just didn't like the experience or were burned in some way. Can you talk about SFM now and why it's so different?
Yeah, we've heard stories on when SFM version 1 came out, it wasn't modular agnostic. So you had to order the system that was specific to your module width. So 32 millimeter, 33, I mean, all the way up to 40. So what happened was, a lot of times the modules would change midstream and the system that they had ordered and delivered won't fit that module. We totally eliminated that issue with this system fitting this one system fitting every module from 32 to 40 millimeter. Again, if they're not familiar with wire management on the system, the system's going to show up and the installers are going to they're just going to look at each other on what to do sometimes. So if people know the system, they're trained on it, there should be no issues with installing the system. It's just going to be very different for the crews.
And I'd say too, going from rail to railless, there's a lot of railless systems out there that just, they don't have the hold or the strength, or they just don't feel as good as the SFM system does. So one thing that you'll notice if you do try out our railless system, if you go up and you grab a module on that ray and you try to shake it or move any of the parts, it's solid. So there's a lot of railless systems out there where the parts are kind of chintzy or they're weak, or the system just seems not very strong. You won't really have that with our SFM. They're well-made parts. They clamp very well. You know, the system is a very strong structural system. So it has the good feel of a mechanically attached rail system with the aesthetics of not having the rails.
Great. Okay, looks like, I don't know if this is a question or comment. To me, it kind of seems like you have done a lot of ground mounts. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I'd say with like a 2-post ground mount system, there is a bit of a similarity where you're trying to put those posts around the perimeter of the system. Most of the ground mounts are still sitting on rails, but there's definitely some aspects between a ground mount and a railless that kind of cross over.
Perfect. Okay, well, with that, that brings us just about to the top of the hour. So great timing, really good content. Unirac, Rich, Josh, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. If you have, for you attendees, any questions, as often happens, you hang up the phone and like, oh, I should have asked. Josh and Rich's information is on the screen here, but we'll also make sure that you have the recording for this, so don't feel like you have to write this down really quick.
I'll put my email address in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, I will as well. If you want to reach out by email.
Yeah, if you don't feel like talking to us.
Perfect. Okay. Everyone, again, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. Any last questions, please reach out to Josh and Rich. And on behalf of BayWa RE Solar Systems, I thank you for joining us. Unirac, Rich, Josh, thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
With you soon.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.